brokers realistically scale their execution and liquidity infrastructure without making things way too complex or unstable to, besides everything else, again, identify toxic flow, identify abusive traders, and basically protect their interests and protect their revenue? I guess maybe, John, we can start with you.
Yeah, let's consider that when you actually look at the tech stack of an average broker, a decent sized broker now, you've got a complexity that you could suffer it over the last few years. So you could suffer your LP, your bridges, your price streams, they all have different symbologies. But now you can't suffer that. So we're looking at, when we look at our different brokers, we see that there are people taking advantage of the way that the broker is still trying to catch up with their own integrations. So there's no single source of truth for a given broker. You might have cent accounts which are recognized on one part of your tech stack, but not on another. And so when this comes through, and we run a risk management system, so we see everything in real time. It comes through, you place a trade, we see it immediately. Sometimes that reporting is broken because the symbology is different. So we see the same position in a variety of different ways. And if somebody knows how to do this, and these guys, when we say toxic flow, we mean guys that are professionals at taking advantage of brokers and CFD technology. They know how to do it. They know how to run patterns. They know how to find different pricing streams. They go and prey on small brokers that don't know what they're doing very well, or they might go and prey on big brokers who don't mind losing a couple of grand here and there. So no, I don't think at this moment we're truly ready to scale without a lot of leakage in the corners.
Andrew, what do you think? Because, I mean, I think if I understood you correctly, you're like, listen, there are proactive steps that you can take. There's no 100% foolproof, ironclad solution for this, but there are steps you can take.
Every broker leaks millions of dollars to toxic flow every year. If you look at big brokers, tens of millions of dollars. If you look at, this is an industry famous for penny-wise, dollar foolishness, right? And does not invest enough in technology. Like, there's a lot of simple things to not overcomplicate things. People don't buy feeds that are fast enough, right? We get feeds from our LPs instead of taking, we also need a feed you take feeds from your LPs. But if you are pricing a CME, base instrument like gold, like S&P 500, you have to have a futures feed too. And nobody wants to pay for a futures feed, but if you don't know where the futures are, then I can tell you that 5% of your customers know where the futures are, okay? And with AI, are about to integrate it directly, into the next thing. And you guys are offering AI now, and lots of people are starting to. Those things are going to get really easy for customers to go and do lots of stuff, take data from different places. And so having a super fast connection to the base data feeds is very important to police what the LPs are pricing us, right? Then you can't overload the servers because there's the latency, stuff to do. Especially like prop firms are getting, roasted on this because they squeeze so many traders into one server because it's demo, right? And so they're slower. There's that type of stuff. So I think all brokers scale primarily because the B-book is still a workable, solution, and you can lose tens of millions of dollars of still being a very profitable company. But I think there's $1 million or $2 million investment that is probably, again, does not erase all of that leakage, but erases 80%, of that leakage. And I think some of it is feeds, and some of it obviously is analytics, and really making sure that post-mortem, you're doing the analysis all the time of, hey, where's my leakage coming from? Why is it coming? And is it a good trader, a lucky trader? Is it a a bad tech issue? And I think, like I said, I can tell you we've seen examples of customers who are already gotten extraordinarily sophisticated at what they've been able to do with very, very little work. Where 5 years ago, that level of, like when I was a CEO of FXCM, we had customers that had 5 programmers they had to employ to do, certain things to be very successful, to build stuff around so they're not imprisoned in an MT5 or a cTrader sort of technicals only type of situation. And they can take data from other sources and sift it through that. Today, a person doesn't need any programmers, right? And I think that where deployment is still tricky, we're probably a year away from that being, sorted out, even less, right? For very little money. So like what we're asking, what I think brokers need to invest $1 million or $2 million into, customer needs to invest about $500 a month, to roast people blind, right? And I don't think people are seeing, be it from futures, sentiment data, news, all of that stuff is going to come in, like there's other stuff and come at the fingertips. Like most people don't know put call ratios and options on, on futures, right, as a really good indicator. There's lots and lots of stuff that customers can now, bring into that. It was just too expensive for them to do. So the amount of what we would say people being able to take advantage is about to rise exponentially, in number of people and the amount of damage those people will do.
It sounds pretty scary, Drew. But I think you actually made a very important point with respect to looking at futures markets and looking at basically other indicators, other even public data that anybody could look at any given point in time and kind of draw some sort of conclusion to see where their price might go. I've even seen that in personal experience in another business that I run, where I've seen traders out of Thailand who you're like, oh, it's just a trader out of Thailand, obviously having access to some kind of information where they had an opportunity to take advantage, and that left the broker blind and kind of not knowing what to do in the trades that were done. And that was a few years ago. So you're saying that what's coming is something, a much bigger tidal wave, sort of.
Yeah, and I think it's just it's going to take the problem that is a $20 million problem today, it's going to make it a $100 million problem, is how I view it.
All right. Moving on to Alexis, how would you solve this issue?
I would say my answer is a bit more on the technical side, on the bridge side. So when we're talking about scaling on execution, we're talking about handling orders, more clients, more trades, more price updates, right? So on the bridge side, you need a bridge that, number one, can scale with the brokerage, right? You don't want to have a soft cap in regards of how much they can scale. And then I think we touched a bit before, it also depends on the infrastructure it's sitting as well. We mentioned before latency. It needs to be in Equinix in London, where your LPs are, your trading platform, your bridge, to create that perfect ecosystem. That's, I would say, the one. And the second part we mentioned was liquidity. What is scaling on liquidity? Is it just adding multiple LPs for better depth and spreads? Is it just for having backup and resilience? That may be part of it, but an important point is to be able to understand an underperforming LP. So as you're scaling, you have multiple LPs. You need to be able to identify at what point this LP needs to change. And so you need to have the visibility, and you need to be able to take action to remove this LP from the equation. And something that is not always discussed on the operational side is something that I used to always tell my engineers is standardize everything that you're doing, right? If you don't standardize the way you're doing stuff, you're creating complexity, right? And the last thing we want is complexity in general in setting things up. So the one thing is standardized. So if you do have an issue, the solution is usually standardized. And as you're scaling, the number one thing is having visibility in all the layers.